Today I'm speaking with Grand Prairie City Councilman and Mayor Pro Tem Mike Del Bosque. Councilmember Del Bosque was elected to represent District 3 in May 2017. Today we are talking about how he became involved in politics and how the previous generation of community leaders, like Ms. Ruthe Jackson, helped encourage him to be more active in his community. We also discussed the new Mi Familia Park project from the Grand Prairie Parks and Rec Department and how the innovative attitude of Grand Prairie helps encourage unity within the community and getting to know our neighbors. Councilman Del Bosque also talks about how organizations such as LULAC are encouraging young people to get more involved in civics and how other community members can do the same. Enjoy! Well, good morning, Councilman Del Bosque. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm so glad that we were able to finally do this because I've wanted to talk to you for a while, and I appreciate it. So you're busy today? Are you on your way somewhere?
I'm on my way back to the center. Let's see here. You can see where I just went off because calls are coming in. But I'm on my way back to the center. If it happens again, I apologize. Yeah, just on my way in, I had to run a couple of errands, meet with the city this morning. So just starting my day again. I have, work. I have just as much time with the city as I do with my business. I mean, they mirror each other so much that it's a labor of love, but one takes just as much as the other. And so I'm constantly having to schedule and look at my calendar on a daily basis. I mean, it took a while for me to adjust, but now it's before I go to sleep, I'm looking at my calendar when I'm waking up, confirming what's there and just using it all the time. I mean, it's an adjustment, but it's fun.
There's certainly a reason they call it a civic duty, and it's because it's not easy. It's not like you just volunteer and get to show up when you feel like it. Like, you're committing to a lot of things. And I don't know that people, I'm sure people assume that people that are running for, office, city council, school board, especially, that it's busy, but I don't know that people know how much it actually takes on a daily and weekly basis.
Oh, it's a lot, it is a commitment. And, with the new people that have come in the last year, just like when I first came in, with city staff and management asking me, that it's a lot of work, but a lot of it is, you get what you put into it. For me, there's a lot of projects that I've been wanting to work on, but yeah, for the new guys after I came in, for Cole that came in, and now Dennis King that he's come in, it's just me spending my time and say, hey, look, even with John when he came in after I did, it's this is a full commitment. This is something that you can't just say, I don't feel like it. And because if not, you're not going to be there the next time. And so it's a labor of love, but it's challenging though. It's very challenging at times.
So one of the things that I was going to ask you is, and I always like to know from everybody that chooses to put themselves in the political eye and put their life in their schedule into such, to have to take on that responsibility. What was it that spurred you into wanting to go into being a city councilman?
So I say that, and I've been asked this many times, and I characterize it as this: it was passing of the torch. My parents, especially my mother, she became involved back when the 60s going into the 70s, when they first moved up from the Rio Grande Valley, from South Texas. And it was one of those things that her mother taught her. And so as, in the 70s, going into the 80s, became more involved. It was something that I was always intrigued. I was interested, but from a distance. And then when I was 12 years old, I participated in my first campaign, and that was with Miss Ruthe Jackson. And that was
she's
in the
kind
80s.
Of influential to all this, isn't she?
yes. And I remember running out and putting signs, yard signs out. And my dad and I, he had signs in the back of his truck, and we stopped here and stopped there. And then became more involved when it was the bond for the Lone Star Racetrack.
Mm.
And so I was the kid that was running in the limos and filling in with waters and Cokes, and they would take off to send them to go vote, and I'd wait there at the location and come back. So I was in there cleaning. They had chips and all that. So I started on the ground level. And then as I became older, started doing things behind the scenes, high school, I was interested, but, as a young kid in high school, that wasn't my first thing, but it was intriguing from a distance. And then as years went by and I became a single parent, but started becoming more interested, but was behind the curtain because my kids came first. And so after my kids into the, they went to, DeBisky and South Grand Prairie. Once they were juniors, seniors, and already getting out of school, I said, okay, now I'm going to go ahead and step out. And so it was something at that time, my parents were getting older in their 70s now. And they're like, hey, look, we don't have the energy or time like we used to. And so they pretty much passed it on to me. And 2013 is really when I stepped out and started getting more involved.
So I'm going to go back and ask you a question in a second, but
yeah.
But I want to talk about your mom and dad for a second. So did they move here to Grand Prairie from there, or did they move somewhere else and then move to, where does your history with Grand Prairie with your family go back to?
So my parents moved here. My dad moved up here in the 60s to work at LTV from McAllen down in Rio Grande Valley in South Texas. They did a big migration of men coming up when the F-16 contracts were here at LTV. And then when on the way up here, he spent 6 months at Baylor down in Waco for training, then came up here and was here for almost a year, then went back and picked up my mother and my 2 older brothers and my older sister. And so I was born here in 72, DFW Hospital, back then when we had a hospital, right?
Right.
And so that's where it all started. And where our neighborhood was on the east side, of Grand Prairie, we call it the avenues. And it was Avenue A through E. And each one of us, it was good back then because we called it Little Mexico. Everybody was from South Texas. And so that's how it all originated. All of where I grew up, my friends, my close friends, the majority of them, their parents, my parents knew each other from the Rio Grande Valley. And, where they came up here to work, more opportunity, things of that. Went to middle school, high school, even elementary school. But my parents cut a different little path for me, a little bit different, starting off in elementary. Most of everyone that I started off at Bonham Elementary, if you remember that. And it's still there, right there off 14th Street. And then we went to private school. And so we went up north to the north side of Grand Prairie to Immaculate Conception. And so all 5 of us. Fortunately, I call it fortunately. My parents say unfortunately. I was the only one that didn't make it. So I got kicked out of private school when I was in 6th grade. And I tell you, those Irish nuns are very strict, very strict. But from there, the avenues growing up wasn't the best neighborhood. It was a hard neighborhood. So my parents moved to the south end of Grand Prairie, and that's where I went to Truman. They went to South. But my parents, when they came in the 60s, there wasn't many Hispanics, Latinos in Grand Prairie. Wasn't many, and there was still, there was racism, and I grew up around racism. I'm very comfortable with it. I accept it. But it was just it was just part of the times back then. And so, going to a private school back in the, 70s and 80s, and, you have Irish nuns, and I was in 6th grade when I met my first African-American, Betty Johnson. I still remember her name. And it was just a different time for me, but for my parents, they told us growing up, in order for you to be successful and in order for you to adjust and get acclimated of what society is now, you have to think like them and you have to be like them, but don't forget who you are and where you came from and who's your race and your culture and everything. So for me, a lot of people growing up, especially when I was in high school, and it's funny because I would be called a coconut. Oh, you look Mexican, but you don't sound. I was like, yeah, because I was brought up. When I went to private school, the time that I spent, Spanish was not, it was forbidden. And if you spoke Spanish in the hallways, I'd see my brothers and my sisters, and I'd say, hello to them in Spanish, and they would get the ruler. or they would get the ring, their Irish ring, and hit us. So Spanish wasn't going to do it. And growing up and then going to Truman, which is, back then that was the new part, Trailwood, all that was the new, neighborhood. So again, dealt with a lot of Anglos. So I picked it up. I said, oh, no, I'm not going to get in trouble. But now it's teaching my kids and teaching myself more of getting back to, our culture and things like that. But, being a councilman, I didn't want to move out of the district. I still live in my district. I represent my district to the fullest because I know a lot of the people. I grew up with a lot of people there. Mm-hmm. And even, and this will segue into one of the questions you'll probably ask about the park and all that and the meaning of that, the changing of that. Mm-hmm. So going back to my parents, it was exciting. It was very different because I got to learn two different cultures, and I'm still learning, something I'm teaching my kids, and as they're teaching me too. So being brought up in Grand Prairie, and it being Grand Prairie for a long time being a sleep town, as they would call it, people would sleep here but do everything on the outside. It's been it's been very challenging, but very advocating. But at the same time, it's been a lot of fun to see a lot of change here. Because growing up, I imagine you've grown up here. Mm-hmm. I think you graduated from South. You were what? I graduated in 91. You graduated in 92, 3? 98. 98. Okay.
Easy.
Wow. And yeah. So a little jab there, but it's changed. The 7-year difference, but it's changed a lot. Mm-hmm. Grand Prairie has changed tremendously, and how do you prepare and how do you work for the change? So it's been good. But Mom and Dad have given me the guidance and has shown me the path of, hey, look, to get involved, here's what you got to do. And so I've taken that. I've taken it and I've learned, and at times I still make bad decisions, but that's all part of life, right?
Well, so it was so funny because I right before you brought this up, I wrote down a note about speaking Spanish, and you're not the first person that I've talked to whose parents were Spanish speaking. I'm assuming that they were Spanish speaking, but right. You, as their child, did not speak Spanish or weren't speaking Spanish or whatever. And so that's seems to be pretty common of especially the 80s, and kind of maybe a stigma about speaking Spanish. And so did your parents encourage you or teach you, or was it just at school that they kept it?
So they taught me at home, and Spanish was my first language. But when I went to private school, and I had my friends there were Anglo. I'm like, who am I going to speak Spanish to? And when I got kicked out, so I rebelled a lot. And so when I got kicked out of private school and we went to Truman, it was the same thing. Who am I going to speak Spanish to? And we'd already moved out of our old neighborhood. In the new neighborhood where my parents live now, which is right across the street from where Jackson is now, it was all Anglos again. So everywhere I went, it was all Anglos. Very few Hispanics. And the ones that I did know, they weren't speaking it either, because who were we going to speak it to? Mm-hmm. So English became my first. But I remember my parents, when we're at home, talking. I'm like, and I would argue with them. Why? Once I leave the house, who am I going to talk to in Spanish? Because there wasn't that many Hispanics there at the time. But now, as my kids, they're 20 and 23. But when they were going to middle school and high school, the demographics have changed so much. And so it's totally different, So yeah, my parents enforced it, but I never carried it out because my friends at that time growing up, very few Hispanics. And the ones that I did, which were 2 or 3 of them, were my really close friends. They didn't, they're the same boat as I was. They're like, who are we going to speak it to?
Right.
Yeah, but all their parents are again from South Texas, and that was their first language.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting how that becomes like a common recurring theme when I talk to people that had grown up in that. So I'm curious. So you mentioned Ruthe Jackson. How did she influence you being more civically minded and being more involved?
So, when I met her, she would, the one thing that I remembered was she says, what you're doing will change many things. Mm-hmm. And I thought, what does that mean?
How old were you when you first came in contact with her?
12 years old.
12.
That was the first
wow.
time. Yeah. And that was during one of her city as a councilwoman, her campaign. And, and so while we were doing this, and my father and I were picking up yard signs from her house. And she said, son, what you're doing today is going to change a lot of things. And I went back in the truck. I said, Dad, what does that mean? And she says, well, what you're doing, and she gets in and she gets involved, we're going to be able to get involved. And what you're going to be doing is going to pay off in the future. Never knowing that 30 plus years, here I am, and I work alongside her daughter, Miss Georgia Clemson, and we're on finance and government together. So it's ironic in the sense of what happened so many years ago of how, what's happening today. So it's interesting. It's interesting at the least.
Was she actively, and I think Miss Ruthe it's very underestimated, and it's not underestimated in certain circles within Grand Prairie, because there's certain people who couldn't forget Ruthe Jackson if they tried. She's so involved. She's so influential in so many things, but there's a lot of people in Grand Prairie that don't know who she was. And it cannot be understated how much she got people involved in being civically minded in this city. I mean, if there is a nonprofit that existed back in the 60s or 70s, chances are she either co-founded it or was on the board for it. And she started so many people into being involved in what's going on in their city. And she, even from, I mean, she would go into Dalworth and interview citizens there back in the 70s, and she has videos of this. And, she seemed to have been very involved in all the different kinds of communities that existed within Grand Prairie. I mean, just you saying that tells me that that's true.
Oh, it is. My mother and Miss Clemson, her daughter, they've been on Lifeline for many, many years. When Miss Jackson, Ruthe Jackson, when she had her TV show, my parents were the first Hispanic couple on her TV show. And we still have the VHS cassette. And, so it was again, my mother was the foundation of what I'm doing today. My mother, again, she passed the torch on to me, but it's how they work together. And as kids, Miss Clemson and I are working together now. So it's second generation and things of that, but it's what she's done in the past. I mean, you think of anything as the simple things of keeping, Grand Prairie beautiful, going out to the park and cleaning up with volunteers. She's been,
the summit.
The summit. You look at the summit. But she's planted so many seeds here in Grand Prairie, so many seeds. And now there's so many things going on, but it's because of what she's been able to do. And her daughter, Miss Clemson, of her, passing the torch and carrying the torch also. And so it's an honor in a way, that, I've been influenced, in different women. I call it the women's power. I totally respect that. 90+% of my business is run by women. They have that motherly care. And so I've accepted that on as a young entrepreneur. And I let them do the things. And I have no problems of following a women's lead. Women, y'all have taught me a whole lot, a whole lot. And, it says a lot coming from a man, right? But going back to Miss Jackson, and Miss Ruthe, I just remember growing up, seeing her at different events that my parents would take me, and just being part of it, and learning the process.
Yeah, and it can't be overstated. One thing that I talked about, I've been talking a lot about, is making sure that as the next generation of adults, that we're finding those young people to encourage to be a part of the process too. And it's so interesting when you go back through some of the newspapers, the Grand Prairie News, and that there was such a push back in the 60s and the 70s for kids in school to be involved civically, that they would publish the newspaper in the city newspaper. There was a lot of things that kids at that time, how they affected the community. And I think that we have lost a little bit of that in the past. And so being able to find those people, that those kids that want to be a part of their community and stay here. That's another thing too, is when you become civically minded and you become involved in your community, you're more likely to stay in your community and become an adult that works for that community, which is also really important.
Oh, it is. I mentor a lot of young adults, a lot of kids. Our family, we created the Del Bosque Family Scholarship Foundation 3 years ago. Last year we weren't, we didn't participate because of COVID, but just this year alone, we awarded students that are graduating from the ISD that are furthering their education. And it's not only if they want, go to a university or college, but even if they want to learn a skill trade. And working with those young adults, it's always advocating that at any level of success in their life, the main thing is to come back home and give back, is to pull the next person up. Just like I'm helping them, pulling them up to the next level of success, it's doing the same thing, paying it forward, always giving back, because just like at some time we all need help. And it's knowing and having to be humble to say, hey, look, I've been through it. I've been in those trenches. Hey, let me help you out. And so we advocate that a lot. A lot of things that we do here, that my family does, that again, learning from my parents, the main thing is giving back and trying to help. Now, today's young adult is a lot different from when we grew up. They're more advanced technology. Look what we're doing today. And, I see a lot of these young kids. They're so technically, and I tell them, y'all have so much advantage versus, I tell stories when we used to have beepers and cell phones weren't around. Now they look like, what the heck is a beeper? How could you live without a phone? What was going on? And, I said, look, it wasn't that long ago. It's not like we were sending smoke signals or anything, but the thing is today's young adult and today's technology, the advantages that they have to really make a change.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I try to advocate a lot of that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, one of the things that kind of spurred me to ask you to come talk to me was you mentioned the Mi Familia playground, or the project, and I don't know much about it. Dwayne Strong and I had a conversation and he kind of mentioned it. And then when I saw that y'all were having a town hall, I was like, this would be a good opportunity for you to talk more about that. So tell, what is that? And talk a little bit more about that project.
So the name came from John Lopez. We were sitting down talking about this project, and it was one of the three things that I committed on my first term of being a councilman. Me growing up in that neighborhood for many years, I would ride out there on my bike with my friends, and we would do anything from going crawdad fishing and going out there to the lake to go catfishing underneath the bridge, to going frogging. We'd go underneath the bridge out into the golf course, and we would go catch frogs at night, and the night security would chase us around, and especially around 4th of July. 4th of July, it was, because back then you could pop fireworks at the lake. And then we'd ride our bikes out the next day in the morning. First thing, everybody was like, all right, we're going to get up early. We're going to ride out there. And we would go and walk around and find all the fireworks people would lose at night. And we would pop those at night. And so we grew up in that park. Over the years, and back then, you would have families. Again, this was a huge Hispanic Latino community that on the weekends, we would go out to the lake and everybody would pull their cars up and we'd have grills and everybody was eating off everybody's grill. It was a huge family. But over the years, you see that change. A lot of your second and third generation move away, even though mom and dad were still there, but it's getting the family back together. So it took me 2 years. My second year going in my first term, we finally got the city of Dallas to bring it over into the Grand Prairie lines. We always managed it as a city because we knew we had weather, but we were very limited of what we could do.
Okay,
so
wait,
long story short,
say that a little bit more, because tell it. Where is the park going to go? Like, give us the streets, and then you made a very important point, because I know that the part of Dallas is a big part of this. So yeah.
So that right there off Harvey, all of Mountain Creek has always been property of Dallas, but we maintain it because residents go there. But we're very limited of what we could do as far as first response. So that was something that I wanted to accomplish. So going in my first year, my first term, meeting with the councilman in Dallas, Councilman Thomas. We got together, we worked the process, and it took 2 years to do it. Now, because of that, when we had our groundbreaking of celebrating that it's in Grand Prairie, a lot of the neighbors came, and a lot of neighbors that I haven't seen in years. And everything that they kept on saying, and they would say, I remember when My Familia would come out here, and I remember when my family would come, and remember this and remember that, and that's where it all originated.
Wow.
And so it was naming for those that have grown up, that have actually grown up in the neighborhood of how it used to be. But over the years, as things change, time has changed, a lot of bad things have happened. Ever since we've taken it over, we have stopped, or let's minimize, and I mean minimize, but we have stopped the prostitution that's been out there, the drugs, a lot of the abuse as far as vandalism, all that stuff, and the park, the restrooms out there. We've cleaned this up. Now we are in a revitalization stage. Now that was our last town hall meeting, is coming with a master plan of bringing the neighborhood back out, bringing the families back out. And so that's where the name came. It's from knowing that growing up in the 70s and 80s, it was pretty much 99.9% Hispanic. It's the Hispanic families coming together. And so that's where the name came out to be, La Familia.
That's awesome.
Mi Familia. Yeah.
So are they going to rebuild the entire park? Is that the plan or the hope?
It is. The plan is it's going to be done in phases. The first phase is right there where the parking is. We're going to be putting in splash pads and family. We're going to be, like, for instance, there's a golf course. But we're going to do a hybrid with that, with the not the golf course, but the basketball court. It's going to be a hybrid between the basketball court and to be able to play pickleball. And so we're going to do things like that. It's going to have fishing. We know that because of the old Air Force Base, that they dump a lot of fuel, this and that. The water, as long as you don't disturb the bottom of it, you can do fishing, catch and release. But we're going to build piers that people can walk out in the pier and go fish and catch relief. On the very south end of the park, there's a lot of heavy water, trees and whatnot, and we're going to make a pier to walk around that to see all the ducks and birds and all the wildlife out there. So it's going to be done in phases, we know, and we know it's going to take a lot of money, but we are going to be revitalizing it in different phases. But the whole thing is to bring the family back out. We're gonna, I've been planning with environmental, recycle cans, recycle boxes, things like that. I definitely want recycled to be a part of this. We do have to take care of Mother Earth. So we're gonna be putting new walk paths, workout stations, all kinds of new family pavilion, things that some of, I know that my constituents that live in that area, some have a low income. They can't afford to go to Epic.
Right.
But if we bring a splash pad out to them for the little kids, things like that can help. And that's what we're doing. So phase one, we will be coming out here, hopefully by going into this summer, by the end of the summer, where we're going to have the first phase already coming out. And that'll be definitely, I'll share it with you so you can share it with everyone. But we'll be sharing that on Facebook, on our website, the city website. But it's going to take at least 2 to 3 phases. So many years, but it is going to take a pretty penny to do it also.
That's amazing. That's just that's so cool to see that happening. Do you have a lot of people really excited about it? Oh,
very much. Yes. And we have lots more people that are excited versus 1 or 2 that are not excited, because they're like, well, all these people are going to come in. Yeah, but that's the whole thing. That's what a park is designed and built for, right? Bring people together. But they just think of all the bad things that have happened before. But then I said, how long have you lived here? I've only lived here 2 or 3 years. Oh, then you don't know the true story. But most of it, yes. Honestly, when I first brought this to Dwayne and to Cheryl, I said, I want to redo this park. And they said, well, what do you want? And I said, have you ever been to Clyde Warren in Dallas? I said, that's what I want. I want Clyde Warren over here. And they're like, whoa, that's a lot of money. I said, and we'll take it in phases. And so that is like where I put it up on a pedestal. Clyde Warren, bring it into Grand Prairie.
Well, you don't even have to build an overpass like Clyde Warren.
Exactly. It's I said, look, it's having those things. Having, where you can play, the big, you can play chess out there or checkers, and having all those big things that people can just hang out. We're going to be bringing in, we have a lot along Harvey around the curve we're going to be bringing that in for parking so they don't park on the street, but we're going to have areas for food trucks to come in. And right in the middle of that park, there's like a draw that comes down and it goes down into a little valley. I said, we can put a stage down there, and that draw can actually be stadium setting to where we can have live music. We can have family night. We can put a screen out there. And when we have, especially in the fall, when the weather's nice, we can have Christmas movies, Thanksgiving movies, all these things to bring family out. You know, I want to be able to bring that, something that, because of how society's now, my thing is the value of family, of bringing them back out to the park to not only to enjoy each other, but to reconnect with your neighbors.
That's exactly
that is
right.
What's missing there.
Oh, 100%. I mean, having that connection with the people that you live, like that you immediately live next to. And social media is great and all that's fine. But like social media does not allow for the feeling of, I know the person living next to me. I know the people that live in my neighborhood, and we're going to actually spend time with each other face to face. Our kids are going to play together. You know,
Correct.
That is very valuable and very important.
You know, growing up in that neighborhood, it was so easy to pick up a baseball game or football game, and we would play out there. We'd play street ball, and we'd play all day. And we didn't have like today where kids sit in front and playing games all day. You know, totally different times. We go out there and pick up games all day long. And I remember growing up, every father had a different whistle. And we'd play and you hear a whistle and everybody would stop. And they say, nope, that's not my whistle. Keep playing. But if it was your whistle, you better get home because dinner's ready. And it wasn't anything that if you acted up, your neighbor's dad, whoever the dad, they'll get on to you, or the mothers. Now it's so different nowadays, you know, but it was a different time, you know, but that's the whole premise of naming the park that, of bringing everybody back together. You know, there's such a need, and it's missing out because a lot of times is you just don't know who your neighbor is now.
Well, and that's so true. And, you know, being kids, I mean, so I was born in 1980. I'm an 80s baby. You were born in the 70s, but I think we can both probably say that we had an experience of we went through a time in just American society where playing outside, everybody became very fearful because we started knowing the threats that existed out in the world. Right.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it became this idea that parents needed to be a lot more controlling over what their kids are doing, and which rightfully so. I mean, there was things going on that were not good. And but I think that we're kind of coming at a place where it's like there's value in knowing who your neighbors are, because neighbors take care of kids in their neighborhood. You can, when you have eyes on the street and you know the kids are playing with certain people and all that, there's value to that. And I think neighborhood watches and stuff like that are kind of trying to get there. But really what it is just people living life together as much as possible and their kids playing together. And, you know, when you see kids playing together and what's going on in society today, it gives you hope that things are going to be okay, because kids play together and they just want to be together and enjoy each other's company, and they could care less about any of this other nonsense. And it's just like watching them be together and enjoy it. There's something that's valuable, and it does something for older generations. Their hearts need to see that, you know, we need to see that. So I think that this is awesome. And it's seeing Grand Prairie's commitment to revitalizing areas that, especially, and I don't mean even neighborhoods, but I mean revitalizing even a fishing hole, making something that people are already doing. Let's make it nicer so that people have a place to stand when they're fishing. You know, that's a huge deal.
Bringing the community together. It's not only revitalizing the park, but it's revitalizing the community.
100%.
Yeah, it's a twofold. So
yeah,
it's good.
So, well, I know that I don't want to keep you for too much longer, but I want to ask you for sure, because you're a big part of LULAC, and I want to talk about a little bit about LULAC and what are some of the projects that you guys. Well, first of all, for people that don't know LULAC, and I don't know who wouldn't, but what is LULAC? And y'all are a service organization, so maybe talk about what are some of the things y'all are working on.
So LULAC was another thing that my parents passed on to me. Them being involved for many years. Here recently, we hold our LULAC meetings here at my medical center in Grand Prairie. You know, LULAC
Which, for those that don't
for,
know, it's on the north side of town on Carrier, on just north
yes,
of Jefferson on Carrier. So
north.
mhm.
I'll give a little plug. It's 517 North Carrier Parkway. And you know, it's funny because in 2015, I came the surgeon, Dr. Serquin. It was his medical buildings for many years. And 2015, I came to him and I said, "Hey, I'd love to purchase your building." And sorry about that. And I said, "I'd love to purchase your building." And he said, "Hey, you're not ready." And I'm like, "Okay." So I rented space across the street. At 2018, he came and he says, "I'm ready to sell." And I said, "Okay." And so May of 2018, we're celebrating 3 years now being here. But the full circle was when I was the age of 10, 11, and 12, my father and I cleaned this medical building so many years ago. Now I own it. But yeah, we specialize in pain management here, back, neck, hips, knees. So that's what we do here. But we hold our monthly meetings here. LULAC stands, it's two pillars. We advocate for education and we advocate to be proactive instead of reactive. And so a lot of it is we're based on education. It's educating those Latinos that just don't know. You look at from anything from your rights, what you're entitled to, anything from there to COVID, vaccinations. We do things with Unidos. That's a program that Steve Dye, our deputy assistant manager now, used to be our police chief back then, he created that. And he brought that in from Garland when he was the police out there in Garland. So LULAC is a Hispanic organization that we invite all cultures to be a part of. But the main thing is uniting together to help those that are in need, those that have the lack of knowledge, to educate them on what is their rights and what we can do to work here within Grand Prairie or without North Texas or much less anywhere else. We've been doing this. We started this chapter. Our chapter is chapter 22262 here 5 years ago with Mr. Sal Sosa, who retired from the ISD. So our chapter consists of John and I, who are city council members, our state representative, Ms. Terry Mesa, Brian Fara, and Gloria Carrillo, which are school board trustees. So we have involvement in the community. And then we have other people that are involved that have been Ana Coca, who's our president. She's a teacher. We have a lot of teachers, a lot of community leaders. And so now we have started our junior league that are going, these are seniors, juniors, and seniors that are at Grand Prairie High, going into the high schools to get them more involved. And that's where we talk about as far as giving back. Now we're getting the young generation involved. And that way they can I awarded 9 of our seniors a scholarship, and they'll have that scholarship as long as they're going to college. Even if they get anything from their bachelor's, or even if they want to be a mechanic, they'll have that until they are ready to go into the professional life. So we do a lot of that. LULAC, that is the 2 pillars that we stand on and what we advocate for.
I cannot believe that it's only been 5 years. Was there another Grand Prairie chapter? Or
yeah, there was other chapters in the past, but those and honestly, those have either passed away because it was an old chapter. And so those that faded away or moved away or whatnot. And so Sal was the one that started it 5 years ago of, hey, let's start getting everybody together. And my parents, they were in the other chapter in the old LULAC for many years. But again, as to get into their upper 60s and their 70s and this and that. So that's where I came in. And that, starting that with Sal, with John and Gloria and them, and getting now, it started with 8 of us. Now we're up to a little over 30. But it's something that is just revolving, and it keeps revolving. So yeah, we have it here at my medical center the 3rd Saturday of every month from 11 to 12.
Oh, good. Okay. So yeah, I just interviewed 5 of the 7 valedictorians for GPISD, and 2 of them actually mentioned being a part of LULAC. And so good. Yeah, they're definitely, I think that's amazing. And so, so what are some of the, is there any like specific project or certain thing that y'all are working on right now specifically?
So we just went to an elementary school what is elementary school by Truman? It's there off of Matthew. I forgot the elementary school, but we just redid cleaned out the garden there. We have every month we have a street here in Grand Prairie off Barton that we go out and pick up trash. Besides that, we have our national league here that we attend to, that Brian or more of our chapter, our president, vice president, treasurer, they go to. But now we're getting ready for scholarships. And so we donate, we award some of the students there that, like you said, they've gotten some awards. So right now what we're working on is just getting ready, since COVID is decreasing, vaccinations are increasing, school again, students are getting vaccinated now, is really getting implemented and threaded into the high schools now.
That's amazing.
So that's our big project right now. It's just building our attendance. Yeah.
I'm glad
membership.
That's awesome. And I'm glad that you mentioned this, because the last thing I wanted to ask you was, you know, I know that during COVID, there was, especially in the beginning, you could see a lack of news sources and information for those that were Spanish speaking. And there was a lot of, you could see that affected the community a great deal, because they didn't, you know, people that might not be attuned to the regular news channels that you could sit there and listen to, it took a little while to get into those communities. So I guess one of my questions, and one of the things that I know about this podcast, and this is one of the things that I want to do, is what are some of the ways that some of the Spanish speaking communities specifically listens to news? How do they consume news? What do they watch? And then the other thing is, I want to get to a place where I can have maybe some of the students or maybe some of the people within that community that can be doing interviews also, so that they can hear, because they would love to be able to hear this conversation. And so, you know, do people know about podcasts? I feel like from a community standpoint of City of Grand Prairie, that's a huge challenge, because a lot of people don't know what podcasts are yet. But, you know, just kind of talk about that a little bit.
You know, your young generation now, your millennials, your 90s, you know, those young adults now, they know about them, even up to me. But, you know, the first generation, no. But it's still a work in process. I can tell you this. Even when I came on the city council, you know, that was a big change, me being the first Hispanic. John came on. Even with the city, as we meet with city staff, things have changed in the last 4 or 5 years, because a lot of the questions we ask now is that in Spanish? Is that offered in Spanish? It was never thought of, because of everything that it's just time is, you know, over time changes, right? And so a lot of things that we do now is when we have our meetings and we're rolling out things, let's say on, for instance, everybody gets the pipeline with their water bill, right? But none of that is in Spanish. But the majority of our citizens are Hispanic. Mm-hmm. And a part of those are Spanish speaking. Now, do we need to learn English? Yes. Are we in the process of it? Yes. But at the same time, a lot of the people that have lived here are, you know, Spanish speaking. So a lot of, for us, is going back to like what Lou like, you know, Unidos, is advocating, educating, but it's making that, building that bridge, that there is a need, huge need. A lot of things that, for instance, when I had my town hall meeting, a lot of the stuff was in Spanish also. And we still have, you know, like I said, first generation that are still here, mostly Spanish speaking. So the need is huge. Getting the mindset is totally different, because us on the city side, you know, a lot of our tax dollars come for the Hispanic. Where my business is here, 90+% of the people are all blue collar. And so educating them of what's going on. For instance, we know that in the past, you know, a lot of our literature for speeding, driving, taking your test, is that in Spanish. A lot of things that we do now, we're always constantly asked. Now, there has been change. Now it's, yes, that also comes in Spanish. So we're not having to ask so much. They're just reminding us. So there is change, you know, but even at that, within the city right now, there's huge change. Right now, before, it was predominantly Anglos. Mm-hmm. Now, our city management has Mr. Bill Hill, African American, Cheryl. So there's diversity now for the first time. starting that transition of representing of who we are in Grand Prairie. But yeah, as far as educating in Spanish, having that, it's an everyday conversation.
Yeah,
but the good thing is that we're willing to have that conversation, and things are starting to happen now.
Yeah, and it's not even just the language barrier, but it's also, every community has its own interests and desires. And what do you want to hear about? What are things that you want, for people to talk about in your community? What's something that, you want to hear about as the Hispanic community? What are events that you want to hear about? Who are people that you want to hear from? Making sure that that's important is something that for me, doing this podcast has always been something I wanted to be more community minded, is finding who are the people that you want to talk to? Who are the people you want to hear from? Who are people in the Hispanic community that are running little small businesses? How does that feel? Right. And there's tons of those business owners here in Grand Prairie.
Yes. Here's the thing. You talk about small business. I'm small business here. A lot of what we do drives the economy here in Grand Prairie. You take, for instance, you look at Trader's Village. Right now, when the weather's good, you can't get anywhere. You can't go down Arkansas, 360, Mayfield, any of the Great Southwest. People are congested. And you look at the population of and you know what? The city makes tax dollars. A lot of what we do here in Grand Prairie is driven by the Latino Hispanic community that make tax dollars for the city. Restaurants that are opening up, things of that nature, So what are we doing to give back and advocate back and educate? I mentioned Unidos. That's a monthly meeting that they have here at the Grand Prairie, the main Grand Prairie library here. That's something that I would ask, go over there and just attend, just to see, because everything they talk about is how to help the Spanish speaking out. You look back months ago when ICE was making arrests and they didn't know, and legalization, all this. We had immigration attorneys there. Again, it was the brilliant thought of Steve Dye coming in and say, hey, look, we know, and we're not going to advocate ICE here, but we know you need to get educated. And he brought people in. And some people were a little, I don't know if I want to go in or not. I don't know if I'm going to get arrested if they got the paddy wagon in the back. But it was the thing of, look, we're reaching out to y'all. I was there. Mayor Jensen was there. We were all there to support, saying, hey, look, we're here to help y'all out. And so that's a lot of it there, is just people getting together. I know so many people that would love to do a podcast with you and bring up a topic and do it in Spanish. That could be easily done. Man,
I would love that so much. I mean, even think about how many in that community are property owners, and understanding your tax bill. Just something that simple. What do you have as rights as a property owner? How do you understand how you pay your taxes? Those are conversations that a lot of people don't know anyway, but those are conversations that need to be had, and making sure that everybody's aware. And I would love to find people that would interview, because I don't know everybody that exists in this city. So,
and I guarantee you there is a percentage of Hispanic homeowners that are 65 and older that do not know about the Homestead Act, that their taxes are locked in at that time and they don't change. And I guarantee you, because they don't know, because they can't read English and whatnot, that they're still paying because they haven't signed up for it. I said, I can even speak to, as far as my mother. She's a beautiful woman, 78 years old. I call her Big Mama, even though she's about 4 foot tall, but she's a power. She's a tower of power, I say. But she does a lot of that, and she would love to come in. But, I look at my father, right? And so he's always on his phone, and he's always either on, looking at the news or what's happening here or playing a game. And my mother says, hey, you're always on the phone. And I said, Mom, let him be on there because, hey, he's learning today's technology. Not only that, but it keeps his mind going. Because if not, if you got to sit there on the couch, he's 80 years old. He's going to sit there, he's going to start dying. Look, I'm glad that he's, dementia not going to happen. Alzheimer's not going to happen because his mind's going. But a lot of that also, there's a lot of people out there that just don't know. And so how do we build that bridge? How do we make that connection especially to the Hispanic Latino community, about things as you're talking about taxes, things that they can advocate for, things that they can learn of what they can do and they're allowed to do. They just don't know. So what do? They stay in the shadows,
Right.
and it doesn't help them at all. And so for us, it's like, for instance, for us trying to get the vote out, right? And so for a lot of the Hispanic was a lot of the Hispanics are like, hey, I don't want to get bothered. Let me just go to work. Let me just come home. But it's their kids and grandkids that are wanting to be more active in the city, that are pulling out their grandmother and grandfather to come out and vote. And so they're getting them to get educated because they can speak to them in Spanish. Now they're becoming more active. And so it's following that same line of, hey, look, who can we get in here to make the connection? But outside of this, anytime you want to meet, I can do introductions. Honestly, would love for you to come out to our next LULAC meeting so you can meet other people in the community. And then just take it from there.
Yeah, I would love to. So just a couple of seconds, since we brought up the homestead exemption, Mayor Jensen sent out a notice for anybody that hasn't seen it, that he's going to encouraging the increase of the homestead exemption, I believe is what he said, and then drop the tax rate. So I did a little bit of search, me being a real estate agent, I did a little search because I don't think people understand. So we have the school district is one taxable entity, and then the city is another taxable entity. So when Mayor Jensen talks about this, he's talking specifically about the city portion of our taxes.
Correct.
And so the homestead exemption that exists within the city is not something that every city actually offers. I started looking around, and like Cedar Hill, as an example, does not have a homestead exemption for their city taxes. But Grand Prairie, for the last, I think it's 5 years, the homestead exemption first became $5,000. Now it's increased to $25,000, I believe. So it has risen massive amounts of incremental increase. And so that's amazing. So thank you as a city councilman. But yeah, so if you want to talk about that for a second, I think that's something that people need to understand.
It's coming out of COVID, it's several parts to this, couple of parts. Main thing is coming out of COVID, a lot of people weren't doing a lot of things. We saw the economy drop. We didn't know exactly what was going to happen. But to even at that, because we generate a lot of it on taxes, what we're able to do, what we're having to do because of Austin cutting what our budget is. We went from 8% down to 3.5%. How are we going to be able to do things? We actually had job freezes within the city, police, fire, equipment, first responders equipment, very important. But we've been able to survive because of new developments, growing, things of that. Even though COVID slowed us down, you see the growth throughout. Mm-hmm. With that being said, that helps us not to come back to those and say, hey, we got to raise your taxes. Mm-hmm. So for us in this transition of getting out of COVID, surviving that, what's happening down in Austin, cutting our taxes there, or what we can do, how do we exist? And so for us as a city, we have to become very competitive. You look at what's happening in Arlington, the stadiums, Texas Live, and all that. What are we doing? We're able to start developing 161, I-30, I-20, 360, all that stuff, 287. So for us, we're becoming more competitive, which rolls over to all of our citizens and all of our homeowners. So not to get into too much depth, but the big picture on a broad stroke is what we're doing today is going to affect what's going to happen tomorrow. And Mayor Jensen came out of this is just, one of the things that we can do. And like you said, when there's other cities around us that are not doing it or never done or not going to, we've been doing it for many years. So it shows the value that we put back into our community as, hey, again, giving back and saying, hey, look, yeah, things are changing, but look what's happening on the big picture. Right now, real estate, it's you see the market now, but as the economy is going to be changing, there's going to be, right now it's kind of a shortage of houses, and what is your experience? 2 to 3 days that they stay on the market?
Oh yeah.
And a lot of times they're getting what they want, if not more.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that being said, the cost of everything is going up. You look at lumber, you look at concrete right now.
Oh yeah, it's insane.
The price is going up. And so how can we help? And this is just a small thing, but it's a way of saying thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for staying there. Thank you for being a resident. Thank you for supporting.
That's amazing. Well, I just really appreciate your time, and I would be happy to come to a LULAC meeting. I think that would be really fun and really educational for me, because I personally want to know how this podcast can grow into that. And those, I've also had conversations with Matt Lowe within the Asian community, because there's another, community that's part of our city. And it's just really awesome being in a city that is this forward thinking about things. And we've come to a place where this has become how we're thinking about things, just thinking about, honoring communities, being more diverse, and really honoring that diversity. And I think we're doing a pretty good job.
Oh, very well. Matthew and I, we talk time to time, we visit, we see each other, and, we're both on a board that's called the International Corridor. And what we're doing, we're
That's
working
awesome.
with, and it's working with Commissioner Allen, Tarrant County, with Commissioner Garcia, Dallas County, and it's bringing the East, the Asian community, over to the West, and the Hispanic community. It's along the corridor of Pioneer. It's what's happening there in Collins and Pioneer, coming all the way Pioneer and Beltline, and it's creating that walkability to where we're going to start making it to where people can walk to restaurants, to shopping again. And that ties into we went over our first plan, and that ties into walkability to go into the park, to Mi Familia Park. So in the months to come, we have another meeting here in a couple of weeks of looking at the design. But once you see this, you're going to say, wow, now this is going to be the wow factor. You talk about game changers, bringing not only Grand Prairie and Arlington together, because we've been working so well, but bringing the community, the different cultures together. We have, like, at 161, the overpass, 161 in Pioneer, all those pillars, they're going to be designed and painted to different African-American, Aztec, Indians, the pyramids, different nationalities of having resemblance along that corridor. So this is going to be vibrant in colors. It's going to be just bringing everything out. So it's really cool it's a heck of a project that's really going to make it, especially since we're mid-city.
Yeah.
So it's going to be fun. And as for you as a realtor, you're going to say, wow, guys, this is, a lot of people are going to be able to make some money.
Yeah.
It's a good thing.
It's really exciting. So. That's really exciting. So, well, thank you so much, Councilman Del Bosque. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I know
now.
Again, we've been, yeah. I'm still here looking like, okay, it's kind of, the rain has died down a little bit, but we're good. But yes, I will reach out to you when we have our next meeting on that Saturday. And then, yes, please come. Love to host you here, and definitely we can talk to the staff or the members here of what you do and how we can make that connection.
Perfect. That would be awesome. All right. Enjoy your day.
Good. Yes, you too.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.